The most dangerous judgment is the one made before a single word is heard. The morning air over Capitol Hill carried the quiet energy of another important day in Washington. Staff members hurried across the broad stone walkways carrying folders filled with legislation, reporters adjusted cameras outside the Senate entrance, and visitors paused to admire the historic dome rising above rows of white columns that had witnessed generations of American history. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary, until one encounter on the Capitol steps quietly changed the course of an entire morning. Officer Tyler Bennett stood beside the primary security checkpoint, watching the steady flow of people entering the building with practiced confidence. Years of protecting government facilities had convinced him that first impressions rarely failed. Experience, he believed, allowed him to recognize who belonged and who did not before a conversation even began. That confidence had become part of every decision he made. Then he noticed a woman walking alone toward the entrance. She wore a tailored navy business suit, sensible black heels, and carried a simple leather portfolio beneath one arm. There was no motorcade waiting nearby. No security detail walked beside her. No assistants hurried ahead to clear her path. She moved with calm purpose, greeting a maintenance worker with a warm smile before continuing toward the Senate entrance. Her name was Vanessa Coleman, although no one standing nearby appeared to recognize her. Tyler stepped directly into her path before she reached the security barrier. "Ma'am, I need you to stop right there," he said firmly. Vanessa immediately stopped and looked at him with calm brown eyes. "Good morning, officer," she replied politely. "How may I help you?" Her composed voice somehow unsettled him more than an argument would have. Tyler studied her for another moment before answering. "This entrance is restricted. I will need identification before you go any farther." Vanessa nodded without hesitation and slowly reached toward the leather portfolio resting beneath her arm. Before she could remove anything, Tyler lifted one hand. "Leave it where it is for now." Vanessa immediately lowered her hand. "Of course," she answered. "If you allow me just a moment, I can explain why I am here." Tyler interrupted before she finished speaking. "You can explain after I determine whether you are authorized to be here at all." A few nearby visitors slowed their pace. Two Senate interns quietly exchanged uncertain glances while a television photographer instinctively pointed his camera toward the growing conversation. No one stepped closer. Public confrontations have a way of creating silent audiences. Vanessa remained remarkably composed. She neither protested nor demanded special treatment. She simply stood where she had been instructed, her expression unchanged despite the attention gathering around her. Tyler interpreted her calmness as overconfidence. "I have seen people try this before," he said. "Confidence is not the same as authorization." Vanessa looked toward the Capitol building before meeting his eyes once again. "Neither is assumption the same as certainty," she replied softly. Her words were respectful, spoken without frustration or sarcasm, but Tyler had already convinced himself that she was attempting to avoid proper procedure. Following department protocol as he understood it, he informed her that she would be temporarily detained while her identity was verified. Standard restraints were applied according to procedure, and Vanessa offered no resistance, maintaining the same quiet dignity that had defined every moment since she arrived. Around them, whispers spread across the Capitol Plaza. Several people reached for their phones. Others simply watched in silence, unsure what they were witnessing. Vanessa never raised her voice. She never announced who she was. She only looked toward the Capitol doors with calm patience, as though she understood that truth often arrived more slowly than judgment. Inside the Senate building, legislative staff members checked their watches as an important committee meeting remained unable to begin. Phones rang inside private offices. Advisors quietly searched empty hallways. Somewhere beyond the marble walls, people had begun looking for one missing senator, completely unaware that she was standing only a few yards away beneath the morning sunlight, patiently waiting while the person assigned to protect the institution remained convinced he was protecting it from the wrong woman. Vanessa Coleman remained exactly where she had been asked to stand, the leather portfolio resting quietly against her side while the morning rhythm of Capitol Hill continued around her. Staff members crossed the marble plaza carrying stacks of legislative documents, tourists admired the historic architecture, and reporters rehearsed opening lines for scheduled broadcasts that had not yet begun. To everyone passing by, she appeared to be another visitor delayed by a routine security procedure. She made no effort to change that impression. Instead, she calmly observed the Senate building with the familiarity of someone who had walked those steps countless times before. Officer Tyler Bennett remained only a few feet away, convinced that every passing minute justified the decision he had already made. The more composed Vanessa appeared, the more suspicious he became. In his experience, nervous people often cooperated quickly. Confidence, however, felt like something different. To him, it suggested that she believed ordinary rules did not apply. Without realizing it, he had begun interpreting her calm dignity through the lens of his own assumptions rather than through her actions. "You have been very quiet," Tyler finally remarked. Vanessa looked toward him with the same respectful expression she had maintained since arriving. "Sometimes listening is more valuable than speaking," she answered gently. Tyler folded his arms. "Listening comes after I know who I am dealing with." Vanessa nodded slightly. "That is fair. I simply hope I am given the opportunity to answer before conclusions become permanent." Her words were calm, measured, and completely free of resentment. A young Senate page walking toward the entrance slowed for a brief moment before continuing inside. Two maintenance employees exchanged uncertain glances while pushing equipment across the plaza. Nearby, a television producer quietly instructed a camera operator to keep recording because something about the interaction felt unusually significant. No one interrupted. The silence surrounding the scene grew heavier with every passing minute. Inside the Senate offices, however, concern had already begun spreading much faster than anyone standing outside could imagine. Chief of Staff Jonathan Reed walked briskly through a corridor lined with portraits of former senators while checking messages that continued arriving faster than he could answer them. A committee room prepared for a major legislative session remained unusually quiet because one essential seat was still empty. Senior policy advisors looked toward the entrance each time footsteps echoed through the hallway, only to return to their notes with growing concern when another staff member appeared instead. "Has anyone confirmed her location?" one committee director quietly asked. Jonathan slowly shook his head. "Security reported that she arrived near the Capitol on schedule, but she has not entered the building." The answer settled over the room like unexpected fog. No one spoke for several seconds. A legislative assistant finally whispered, "That has never happened before." Jonathan immediately contacted Senate Security Director Emily Foster, who was already reviewing exterior camera feeds from multiple entrances. Outside, Tyler received another radio transmission requesting heightened awareness because an important member of the Senate had not yet checked in for the morning session. He acknowledged the message without giving it much thought. Important officials arrived every day, and he assumed someone else would locate the missing senator soon enough. Vanessa quietly looked toward the Capitol doors as another group of staff members hurried inside carrying briefing folders. She neither complained about the delay nor attempted to identify herself. Instead, she stood patiently beneath the morning sunlight with quiet confidence, understanding that truth rarely needed to rush because eventually it always found its way into the open. Only a few hundred feet away, an entire Senate leadership team had begun searching for one missing woman, completely unaware that she had never disappeared at all. She had simply been waiting for someone to replace assumption with understanding. Officer Tyler Bennett had always believed that experience gave him the ability to recognize trouble before it happened. Years assigned to Capitol security had convinced him that quick decisions protected people better than long conversations. Every successful judgment strengthened that confidence until it slowly became something far more dangerous. He stopped questioning his own first impressions. Standing beneath the towering white columns of the Senate entrance, he watched Vanessa Coleman with growing certainty that she was hiding something simply because she remained calm. The standard restraints remained secured according to procedure, yet nothing about her behavior reflected panic or hostility. She stood with quiet dignity, looking across the Capitol grounds as though the delay inconvenienced everyone else more than it inconvenienced her. Tyler found that composure difficult to understand. Most people demanded explanations. Most people protested. Most people insisted they had done nothing wrong. Vanessa did none of those things. Instead, she waited patiently, allowing silence to fill the space where frustration might have appeared. Tyler stepped closer, studying her expression once again. "You seem unusually calm for someone in this situation," he said. Vanessa looked toward him with gentle sincerity. "Remaining calm gives everyone a better chance to make the right decision." Tyler gave a quiet shake of his head. "Confidence does not change procedure." Vanessa nodded immediately. "I agree. Good procedure also leaves room for careful listening." The answer lingered in Tyler's thoughts longer than he expected, although he refused to admit it. Nearby, several tourists paused beside the Capitol fountain, quietly discussing the unusual scene unfolding at the security checkpoint. Two Senate interns standing near the entrance whispered to one another before hurrying inside carrying folders filled with committee schedules. A television camera remained pointed toward the plaza, its operator sensing that something important was developing without fully understanding why. Inside the Senate building, the atmosphere continued changing by the minute. Chief of Staff Jonathan Reid walked quickly through the leadership offices, stopping briefly outside the committee chamber where senators and advisors waited around an empty seat reserved for one person whose absence had become impossible to ignore. Phones rang almost continuously. Staff members checked calendars, security logs, and transportation schedules. "Any update?" one senior advisor quietly asked. Jonathan looked down at another unanswered message before responding. "She was seen approaching the Capitol this morning." After that, every confirmed detail disappears. Across the room, Senate Security Director Emily Foster studied multiple camera feeds displayed across a large operations screen. Exterior cameras showed hundreds of visitors crossing the grounds, yet one image repeatedly drew her attention. A woman wearing a Navy business suit stood near the primary security checkpoint surrounded by curious onlookers. The camera angle was too distant to identify her face clearly, but there was something unmistakably familiar about the posture, the portfolio, and the calm way she carried herself. Emily enlarged the image without speaking. Outside, Tyler received another radio transmission requesting every officer remain alert because senior Senate leadership had personally joined the search for the missing official. He acknowledged the message with complete confidence, still believing the search had nothing to do with the woman quietly waiting only a few feet away. Vanessa lifted her eyes toward the Capitol dome for a brief moment before looking back at Tyler. "Officer," she said softly, "sometimes the hardest part of public service is remembering that every person has a story we cannot see." Tyler offered no reply. He believed he already understood the story standing before him. What he did not realize was that only a short distance away, Emily Foster had already left the Security Operations Center, carrying the enlarged camera image through the Capitol corridors as she hurried toward the front entrance, following the growing certainty that the person everyone had been searching for had never truly gone missing at all. Inside the Senate building, concern that had begun as a quiet inconvenience was steadily becoming impossible to ignore. The committee chamber remained prepared for one of the most significant legislative sessions of the month, yet one chair at the center of the room remained empty. Thick briefing books rested unopened beside neatly arranged microphones while senior advisors exchanged increasingly anxious glances. Every passing minute carried greater weight than the one before. Chief of Staff Jonathan Reid stood beside the long conference table reviewing another series of unanswered messages before looking toward Senate Security Director Emily Foster. "We have checked every scheduled entrance," he said quietly. Transportation confirmed she arrived on time. There is no indication she ever left the Capitol grounds. Emily lowered her eyes to the tablet in her hands where security camera footage continued cycling across multiple screens. One image appeared again, captured from a distant exterior camera overlooking the primary security checkpoint. The picture remained slightly blurred, but one detail immediately caught her attention. A woman in a navy business suit stood quietly beside an officer, holding a familiar leather portfolio beneath one arm. Emily enlarged the frame once more, studying the posture rather than the face. She had worked alongside Senator Vanessa Coleman for years, long enough to recognize the quiet confidence with which she carried herself. Emily slowly looked toward Jonathan. "I believe I know where she is." Without waiting another second, both of them left the operations center accompanied by several members of the Senate Security Leadership Team. They moved quickly through marble hallways lined with portraits of former lawmakers before stepping into the bright morning sunlight outside the Capitol. Across the plaza, visitors continued taking photographs while reporters waited for scheduled interviews that had not yet begun. None of them realized that the people now crossing the plaza at a determined pace were searching for someone standing in plain sight. Officer Tyler Bennett noticed the approaching group almost immediately. He straightened his posture, assuming they were responding to the growing security activity reported over the radio. His confidence remained unshaken. Whatever concern had brought senior officials outside, he believed it could not possibly involve the woman patiently waiting beside him. Vanessa Coleman stood exactly where she had remained since the beginning of the morning. She looked toward the approaching officials without surprise, her calm expression unchanged despite the curious crowd now watching from every direction. A light breeze carried the sound of footsteps across the polished stone as Emily Foster drew closer. Reporters instinctively raised their cameras. Several legislative aides paused near the Capitol entrance, sensing that something important was unfolding. Jonathan Reed's pace quickened as recognition replaced uncertainty. Tyler glanced briefly toward Vanessa before looking back at the approaching officials. "Looks like command finally found whoever they were searching for," he remarked. Vanessa answered softly, "Sometimes people spend the longest time searching because they are looking everywhere except the place where the truth has been waiting." Tyler offered no response. He remained convinced that she was speaking in general terms rather than describing the very moment unfolding around them. Emily and Jonathan were now only a few yards away. The expressions on their faces were no longer those of uncertainty but unmistakable relief. Behind them, additional Senate security personnel slowed their pace as they reached the checkpoint, careful not to create unnecessary attention. The conversations surrounding the Capitol entrance gradually faded into complete silence. Every eye turned toward the small group gathering beneath the towering white columns. Tyler instinctively stepped forward, prepared to brief the arriving officials on what he believed had been a routine security matter. He had absolutely no idea that within the next few seconds, a single name would transform the entire meaning of that morning and force everyone standing there to reconsider what true authority had looked like from the very beginning. The morning crowd outside the Senate entrance slowly fell silent as Senate Security Director Emily Foster and Chief of Staff Jonathan Reed crossed the marble plaza with unmistakable purpose. Behind them, several members of the Senate security team followed in disciplined formation, their expressions calm but filled with growing relief. Visitors instinctively stepped aside to clear a path while reporters quietly redirected their cameras toward the approaching officials. Officer Tyler Bennett immediately straightened his posture, believing he was about to provide a routine briefing regarding the security matter he had handled throughout the morning. He glanced once toward Vanessa Coleman before looking back at Emily. "Director Foster," he began confidently, "this individual attempted to access the restricted entrance without verified authorization. I secured the situation while we confirmed her identity." Emily listened without interrupting. When he finished speaking, she looked past him toward Vanessa. The concern that had filled her face throughout the morning disappeared instantly, replaced by sincere respect. She stepped forward without hesitation. "Senator Coleman," she said warmly, "we have been searching everywhere for you. The committee has been waiting, and everyone was deeply concerned." Those words seemed to freeze the entire plaza. Jonathan read immediately, followed with a relieved smile. Senator, the hearing cannot begin without you. We were afraid something had happened during your arrival. Vanessa answered with the same quiet composure she had shown since the beginning of the morning. Everything is all right, she replied gently. There was simply an unexpected misunderstanding. Tyler felt every assumption he had made collapse beneath the weight of a single sentence. His eyes moved from Vanessa to the senior officials surrounding her, then toward the growing crowd whose expressions had shifted from curiosity to disbelief. The woman he had quietly humiliated in front of strangers and temporarily restrained according to what he believed was proper procedure was not an unfamiliar visitor. She was a sitting United States senator whose presence had been essential to one of the most important legislative sessions of the day. Around them, whispers spread through the Capitol grounds. Several reporters lowered their microphones for a brief moment, processing what they had just witnessed before hurriedly contacting their newsrooms. Legislative aides exchanged stunned glances while tourists quietly asked one another if they had heard correctly. Emily Foster turned toward Tyler with remarkable professionalism. Officer Bennett, she said calmly, Senator Coleman frequently chooses to arrive without unnecessary attention because she believes every citizen should experience the same public entrance. She has always preferred service over ceremony. Tyler opened his mouth to respond, but no explanation seemed sufficient. Vanessa slowly turned toward him. Her expression remained calm, free from anger, embarrassment, or resentment. Officer Bennett, she said softly, public service asks difficult things of everyone who wears a badge. Tyler lowered his eyes. Senator, I sincerely apologize for how I handled this morning. Vanessa acknowledged his words with a gentle nod. Thank you, she replied. The greatest value of an apology is not the words themselves. It is the willingness to grow afterward. Those standing nearby listened in complete silence. No one expected harsh criticism. No one expected public humiliation in return. Instead, they witnessed leadership expressed through grace rather than authority. Emily quietly signaled that the committee room was fully prepared whenever the senator wished to proceed. Vanessa accepted her leather portfolio, which had remained untouched throughout the morning, and thanked every member of the security team with quiet courtesy before walking toward the Senate entrance beside Jonathan Reed and Emily Foster. As the historic doors opened before her, Tyler remained standing beneath the white marble columns, watching the woman he had completely misunderstood disappear into the building she had faithfully served for years, finally realizing that genuine authority never announces itself because true character has already spoken long before anyone learns the title carried behind the name. As Senator Vanessa Coleman disappeared through the Senate doors, the conversations that had filled the Capitol Plaza slowly returned, but nothing about the morning felt the same. Reporters quietly lowered their cameras, visitors resumed their tours, and staff members hurried back to their offices carrying far more than legislative folders. They carried a lesson they had witnessed unfold with their own eyes. Officer Tyler Bennett remained standing beneath the white marble columns, unable to move for several long moments. The certainty that had guided him since the beginning of his career had been replaced by an uncomfortable but necessary realization. The greatest mistake he had made that morning was not following procedure. It was allowing assumptions to influence how he applied it. Within the hour, Tyler was asked to report to the Capitol Security Administration office. The conference room overlooking the Capitol grounds was quiet and orderly, furnished with polished oak tables, neatly organized reports, and large monitors prepared to review the morning's security footage. Captain Richard Hayes stood beside the screen while members of the security leadership team gathered around the room with professional composure. No one appeared angry. No one rushed to assign blame. The atmosphere reflected responsibility rather than punishment. Captain Hayes looked toward Tyler with calm professionalism. "Please have a seat," he said. Tyler complied without speaking. The captain waited until everyone was settled before continuing. This review is not about finding someone to criticize. It is about understanding how professional judgment can be influenced by assumptions without us realizing it. The room remained silent as the first security recording appeared on the screen. The footage showed Vanessa arriving at the Capitol, greeting a maintenance worker with a polite smile, stopping immediately when instructed, and cooperating with every request made by security personnel. She never argued. She never attempted to leave. She never demanded special treatment. The recording continued as she patiently waited while the situation unfolded around her. Captain Hayes paused the video and looked around the room. "What do we observe?" One supervisor quietly answered, "She cooperated from the first moment." Another added, "She remained respectful even when given every reason to become frustrated." Tyler stared at the frozen image displayed across the screen. For the first time, he was not watching the encounter through the confidence of his own decisions. He was seeing it through the actions that had actually taken place. Captain Hayes finally turned toward him. "Officer Bennett, what do you see now that you did not see this morning?" Tyler took a slow breath before answering. "I see someone who never gave me a reason to question her character. I created those reasons before I understood who she was." No one interrupted him. The honesty of the admission carried more weight than any formal explanation could have. Later that afternoon, Captain Hayes informed Tyler that Senator Coleman had personally requested one additional meeting before returning to her legislative schedule. Tyler entered a small conference room where the senator sat with Jonathan Reed and Emily Foster reviewing the day's revised agenda. She looked up and greeted him with the same calm warmth she had shown throughout the morning. "Officer Bennett," she said gently, "thank you for coming." Tyler stood respectfully. "Senator, I wanted to apologize again." Vanessa smiled kindly. "I believe you already have." She paused briefly before continuing. "Now let your actions become the apology people remember." Those simple words settled deeply within the room. They carried no accusation, only expectation. Tyler nodded slowly. "I will." Vanessa gathered her portfolio and prepared to leave for the delayed committee session. Before stepping into the hallway, she turned back one final time. Every person who approaches these doors deserves the same opportunity to be understood before they are judged. Protect that principle, and you will protect far more than this building. As the door quietly closed behind her, Tyler remained standing in thoughtful silence, realizing that the most valuable lesson of his career had not been taught by policy manuals or training exercises, but by the quiet dignity of someone who never needed to remind anyone of her position to demonstrate what true leadership looked like. The days that followed brought changes that could not be measured by headlines or public attention. Inside the Capitol Security Division, the morning that had begun as an ordinary assignment slowly became the foundation for a different kind of training. Captain Richard Hayes gathered officers from every shift inside the department's instruction room, where a single sentence appeared on the presentation screen before the session began. It read, "Professional judgment begins with observation, not assumption." The room remained silent as officers took their seats. Some had heard about the incident only through internal reports. Others had watched portions of the security recordings during routine briefings. None of them expected the discussion to focus so little on discipline and so much on responsibility. Captain Hayes stood at the front of the room with his hands resting lightly on the podium. "We are not here to criticize one officer," he began. "We are here because every one of us can learn from one decision that affected an entire institution." Officer Tyler Bennett sat quietly among his colleagues, taking notes without once looking away from the presentation. He no longer viewed the morning outside the Senate entrance as an isolated mistake. He understood it as a reminder that confidence without reflection could quietly become its own obstacle. One by one, experienced officers shared stories about moments when listening had prevented misunderstandings, while newer recruits asked thoughtful questions about balancing security with respect. The conversation remained honest, practical, and focused on improving future decisions rather than revisiting past ones. Across Capitol Hill, Senator Vanessa Coleman continued serving exactly as she always had. Committee hearings resumed, legislation moved forward, and meetings filled every hour of her schedule. She never sought public recognition for what had happened outside the Senate building. When a reporter briefly asked whether she intended to comment on the incident, she smiled politely before answering, "Public confidence grows when institutions are willing to learn." That lesson is more important than any individual headline. Her response quickly circulated through news organizations because it reflected calm leadership rather than personal grievance. Several weeks later, the Capitol hosted an annual professional development forum attended by law enforcement officers, legislative staff, educators, and community leaders from across the region. Senator Coleman accepted an invitation to deliver the opening remarks. The auditorium filled with hundreds of attendees as she stepped to the podium beneath the American flag. She paused for a brief moment before speaking. "Leadership is revealed long before titles are introduced," she said. "Every encounter offers an opportunity to strengthen trust or weaken it. The choice belongs to each of us." The audience listened in complete silence. There were no dramatic stories or emotional accusations. Instead, her words carried the quiet authority of lived experience. Sitting several rows from the back, Officer Tyler Bennett listened carefully to every sentence. He had chosen to attend on his own time, believing that the most valuable education often came from those who responded to difficult moments with grace rather than resentment. As the audience rose in respectful applause, Tyler remained standing a few moments longer than everyone else. He was not applauding a title or a public office. He was honoring the example of someone who had demonstrated that true leadership never depends on demanding respect. It grows naturally through patience, fairness, humility, and the willingness to see the humanity in every person before making a judgment that cannot easily be taken back. As autumn gradually settled over Washington, the lesson that had begun on the Senate steps continued spreading far beyond the security checkpoint where it first unfolded. New training materials were quietly introduced across the Capitol Police and Senate security divisions, emphasizing communication, observation, and impartial decision-making as essential parts of public service. Instead of presenting the morning as an embarrassing failure, instructors described it as an opportunity to strengthen the culture of accountability. Captain Richard Hayes addressed another room filled with officers from different assignments, standing before a screen that displayed a simple message. Every person deserves the same respect before their identity is known. He allowed the words to remain on the screen for several quiet moments before speaking again. Professional excellence is measured by consistency. The standards we apply to one person must be the same standards we apply to everyone. Officer Tyler Bennett listened from the middle row with complete attention. Months earlier, he might have considered those words routine policy. Now they carried personal meaning. He understood that fairness was not something reserved for extraordinary situations. It was built one ordinary interaction at a time. During the discussion that followed, officers shared practical examples of situations where patience had prevented misunderstandings and respectful conversations had produced better outcomes than quick assumptions. No one spoke about perfection. They spoke about improvement. Across the Capitol complex, Senator Vanessa Coleman remained focused on the responsibilities that had always guided her career. Committee hearings continued, legislation advanced, and meetings filled every hour of her schedule. Yet she also accepted invitations to speak with interns, university students, and young public servants interested in leadership. During one discussion, a student asked how she remained calm when treated unfairly. Vanessa paused thoughtfully before answering. "If I allow another person's mistake to decide my character, then I have surrendered something far more valuable than my reputation." Real leadership begins by protecting your principles, even when circumstances become difficult. The room became completely silent. The students wrote down every word, recognizing that the lesson extended far beyond politics or government. Several weeks later, the Capitol hosted an open house welcoming families from across the country. Children explored historic chambers while volunteers explained how laws were created and how public institutions served the nation. Officer Tyler Bennett was assigned to assist visitors throughout the day. An elderly couple approached him looking uncertain about where to find the Senate gallery. Tyler greeted them with a warm smile, listened carefully to their questions, and personally walked them toward the correct entrance instead of simply pointing down the hallway. Nearby, Senator Vanessa Coleman quietly observed the interaction while speaking with a group of high school students. She noticed the patience in Tyler's voice, the respect shown to complete strangers, and the confidence that now came from understanding rather than assumption. She smiled gently before returning her attention to the students without saying a word. There was nothing more that needed to be said. The lesson had already become part of the person standing before her. As afternoon sunlight streamed through the historic windows and stretched across the polished marble floors, visitors from every background continued walking through the Capitol with curiosity and hope. Most of them knew nothing about the morning that had quietly changed 2 lives months earlier. Perhaps that was exactly how meaningful change was meant to happen. Not through public celebration or endless attention, but through ordinary moments where people chose fairness before judgment, understanding before certainty, and respect before recognition, allowing trust to grow one encounter at a time. Winter arrived quietly in Washington, but the lesson born beneath the Senate columns continued to echo long after the cameras had disappeared and the headlines had moved on. Every morning, visitors from every corner of the country climbed the same marble steps carrying different hopes, different concerns, and different stories. Some came to witness democracy in action. Others came simply to admire history. None of them knew how one ordinary morning had quietly reshaped the way many public servants viewed the responsibility entrusted to them. Officer Tyler Bennett no longer measured success by how quickly he reached a conclusion. Instead, he judged every day by how carefully he listened before making one. His fellow officers noticed the difference almost immediately. New recruits often chose to accompany him because they appreciated the patience with which he greeted visitors, answered questions, and handled uncertain situations. One afternoon, a young officer asked him what had changed his approach to the job. Tyler looked across the Capitol grounds where families, students, and veterans walked together beneath the American flag before answering. "Authority gives us responsibility," he said quietly. "Respect determines whether we deserve the authority we have been trusted with." Those words stayed with the young officer long after the conversation ended. Across the Capitol complex, Senator Vanessa Coleman continued serving her state with the same quiet dedication that had defined her career long before that memorable morning. She chaired hearings, met with constituents, reviewed legislation, and welcomed students who dreamed of serving their communities one day. She never mentioned the misunderstanding outside the Senate entrance during speeches or interviews because she believed lasting change came from improving institutions rather than revisiting personal moments. During a leadership forum attended by college students, one young woman asked how she remained gracious when facing unfair treatment. Vanessa smiled thoughtfully before replying, "Character is revealed most clearly when circumstances tempt us to abandon it. Never allow another person's assumptions to decide the kind of person you choose to become." The auditorium remained silent as every student carefully considered her words. Months later, during another public open house at the Capitol, Tyler was assigned to welcome visitors entering the Senate building. As families passed through the security checkpoint, he greeted each person with the same courtesy, whether they arrived wearing business suits, work uniforms, school jackets, or casual clothing. Every question received the same patient answer. Every visitor received the same opportunity to be heard. From a nearby hallway, Senator Coleman briefly noticed the interaction while walking toward another committee meeting. She paused for only a moment before offering Tyler a warm smile. He returned the gesture with quiet gratitude. No words were necessary because both understood what had changed. It was never about recognizing an important title. It was about recognizing the value of every human being before any title was known. As evening sunlight settled across the Capitol dome and long golden reflections stretched over the marble steps where everything had once begun, the building welcomed another generation of citizens eager to witness the work of public service. The walls remained the same. The traditions remained the same. But somewhere within those familiar halls, a lesson had quietly taken root. Real leadership does not demand recognition. Real justice does not depend upon appearances. And the strongest institutions are built by ordinary people who choose to replace assumption with understanding, certainty with humility, and authority with compassion. Because in the end, a badge may represent duty, a Senate seat may represent public trust, but only character leaves a legacy that continues long after every title has been forgotten.